Hey everybody, so I wanted to do a quick intro to the video that we're going to be doing with Lights Fort, because it's actually a series, because we had the privilege of going out and filming with Wandering Woodsman Cliff, my best friend Zeller. That would be his new name, best friend Zeller. But also Luis from Simplyexploventuring. And I'm going to put in the comments, also in the description, the link to his channel, link to Cliff's channel, for those of you that aren't familiar with Cliff. We're actually going to be doing quite a few of these now. Today, we're actually going out and hoping, knock on whatever, that it doesn't rain so it's more enjoyable. But we're actually going to Union Canal Days here in a couple hours, Cliff and I. And I'm not sure if Lewis is going to be there or not, but on June 10th, then they're also going to be having Old Annville Days, which is Annville. We've done a number of videos about town series there, and pretty cool. We're all three of us are going to be there as of this point, unless plans change. And they have a bunch of different cool events there, and there's a bunch of cool things today as well that I'm looking forward to, some reenactments. It's also the 150th anniversary of Jonestown Bank and Trust, so they're going to have some special activities that they haven't had normally there. But we're not going to, I don't even think they have the Union Canal boat going today, but we're not going to do that yet. I'm going to wait till maybe sometime in June, because I want to take that ride again, so you guys can experience going through the tunnel and then back through again, because the presentation that she had in the tunnel was fantastic, and it's definitely an experience to enjoy. She's one of those tour guides that really makes history come alive. This particular series of what we're doing here, we had the privilege of visiting, I make the mistake of saying Lebanon Conservancy, because on my Facebook for Hometown Historian, I have a lot of different historic associations and groups, and that's where it came up, that this event was happening, where they were showing the four different buildings. The actual organization is the Historic Preservation, I think it's Historic Preservation Society of Lebanon County, or sorry, it's the Historic Preservation Trust of Lebanon County. My brain's not functioning. You've seen that in a couple of the videos. I still have this fibro fog going, and my brain just, then I can't put two and two together sometimes. Plus, I'm getting old. But I keep on getting stuff from AARP, and it's like, it's not quite that time yet, I don't think. But feel like it physically sometime. But anyways, they have four buildings in Lebanon Valley, Lebanon County, that they own and they preserve and take care of. And the first is the Lights Fort, which we're about to visit. That's the one that has the most work to do. This is also the oldest building. I believe built in 1742. It's the oldest building in not only Lebanon City, but I believe Lebanon County, because the oldest fort per se is the Heinrich Zeller House over near Newmanstown. But it's called that because the first fort, I think, was built in like 1728 or something like that. But the first fort was log, and then they tore that down somewhere around, I think, 1748. So the stone structure that stands there today is actually about 5 or 6 years older, or newer, I should say, I guess is the best way to put it, than Lights Fort. So, but both are very historic forts, even though they technically are more places of refuge, but their intended purpose became that of a fort during the French and Indian War. So them and probably the Meyer homestead over in Myerstown are probably the closest things to personal. Then I said Reed's Fort as well, and there's another one called Barnett's Fort. There's a couple. There's maybe like 5 or 6 that soldiers actually stayed at, because I think soldiers actually stayed at Lights Fort and some of these other, because they were big enough that they could actually handle like a group of soldiers that was going from one fort to the next, because they usually, the forts that were considered forts, they were about 5 to 10 miles in between each one, like Fort Manada, Fort Swatara, then you had Fort Henry, and then going westward, you would have had, Fort Hunter. And I believe there's another one possibly potentially in between there that they somewhat consider, like here, Patton's Fort or Barnett's Fort was considered a fort. But Anyways, you had a lot of these places of refuge, and it has the most work that has to be done to it. It really, sometime there was some hurricane that came through, storm, I think they said some storm Helen, something like that. It's in the video, I believe. She talks about it. It might be part two of the Lights Fort videos that we're doing. That came through and it destroyed the northern side of the house because there's actually 3 floors, well, technically 4, because you have the basement, which is where they have the spring. Then you have the first floor, which is level. Then you have the second floor, and with a lot of those houses, traditionally you had a half floor, which was technically an attic, but they would use it for sleeping space and things like that, and storage and whatnot, when depending on the use of the building. But the northern facing side of the building, that second floor and attic space, they wind up tearing it down. What they'd like to do is they'd like to return it to the original Dutch German style architecture, where there's sort of like a curve of the roof. I'll have original pictures of that in part two, what it would have looked like and what they'd like to return it to. But that's damaged and gone for right now. But they'd like to replace that, and you'll see at the beginning of the video when we first start going into it, how the beams that go across on the second floor, that would be the floor joists, if you will, on the left side, they're all just rotted out. They call it the biggest burg house in Lebanon County, but a lot of that stuff they're trying to fix. I think in a couple of weeks they're going to start working on the northern side of the place. Try to get the stairwell back. They was sometime they want to return the fireplace to how it was. They'd like to return that building exactly like these other 3 buildings, which the Chestnut Street Log House we didn't go see, but we will go see in like June or August. June through August, I think they have it every Wednesday. It's open for a decent bit. And Jan had said if I contact her, she'll get the guy that knows the most about it to meet us there so he can go through everything from the cabin itself, because it's a traditional Germanic log structure. Because a lot of the immigrants in this area, especially when it was called Steigstown, that's a town, or that house, the log house, would have been emblematic of what all the other houses around that would have looked like. So you can basically look at that house and think, remove everything in your imagination that's around you now, and just think of those houses would have been what it would have been. They would have had a traditional German garden behind, and just a small little area of land, but it fulfilled all their needs. And that one we didn't go to see because it was only 1 to 4. So with 3 hours, we figured we'd like to have an hour for each building, and to also give us drive time in between each, which it worked out perfectly. If we'd moved a little faster and not gotten such a chance to talk to some of the individuals, we could have got Chestnut Street Log House in, but because it's open at other times, and it's cool now we made the connections and we want to go back, we can also contact some of the different individuals and they will open them up for us, because we're building those relationships now, which is part of what this channel is about. The Lights Fort, some of that construction is beginning, I think, in the next week, so they're trying to do on that north side, replace some of that stuff. So hopefully at some point they'd like to make it sort of a cultural center, where it can go, because it has coming up on 300 years of history. So there's a lot of different eras that they can have events for there on their acre and a half of property there. So it's a cool, lot of potential there, and that's what they're going for. And I'm hoping to join them in their efforts, because if we can get a number of people that can really join in the efforts, donate and those types of things, this place can be fully preserved like the rest of them. The other 3 that are on the Lebanon Historic Preservation Trust of Lebanon County. The third place we went to was the Lindley Murray Schoolhouse. Now this is right there on Indiantown Gap, or outside of Indiantown Gap, on Asher Minor Road. And I think Indiantown Gap actually maintains the property, but it is owned once again by the Historic Preservation Trust of Lebanon County. But each of the individual buildings are sort of responsible for their own, if they have to raise money or if they have a specific need, they sort of take care of it. Now, this was, to me, was the coolest just because it was the most complete and there was so much to look at. And that's when I thought I lost the video. Thankfully, Josh found it again. I was freaking out because I was like, oh no, because there's another cool part of it that is just something that you're not going to get again with a return. is an older gentleman, and him and his wife were the people that were sort of the tour guides, or just sort of watching over the place when people came in. He started telling me some really cool stories. I don't think he fully realized that I was still trying to film, so but I didn't want to leave because he was telling these cool stories. So I think that's going to be in a second video. So there's going to be a second video with Lindley Murray Schoolhouse. I'm going to separate the two, just because you get to hear some really cool stories about his time at HB Reese and just how different the work atmosphere was, the way owners of businesses, entrepreneurs like HB Reese approached business, and how his kids approached business as well, and what phenomenal people it were. So I think that'll be a good second video, just to hear someone like that is passing on some of these legacies and these awesome stories that you don't hear every day. And then the final video, which would be the fifth video of the series, which that one might happen second or third, is Monroe Valley Chapel. We visited there a number of times. Is such a clean facility. Like Tom Donmoyer and the group of people that have all come together have done such a phenomenal job with that place. That's the final place that we visited in this grouping of videos. A little less to see there, just because it's a regular chapel. I guess it was used by the Lutherans and the Reformed Church, but it was also, I've read at a number of places, that it was used as a Moravian mission. The original building was a log structure that was built around 1750-ish. The current structure that's standing was built 1840. So whether back in that cemetery there is a Moravian part where it's all flat stones, there's sort of things that make sense to it, and then parts that don't, because of the Moravian church right across Little Mountain, just south of that. It's why would you have a Moravian mission? But I heard it was also a Moravian mission put there specifically to the Native Americans. So the positioning for that makes sense, but I don't know. And just some of the dates on the other buildings. Lindley Murray Schoolhouse was built 1850, operated till 1947. And then the Chestnut Street Log House, I believe, they don't have an exact date on it, but they think somewhere between probably 1760 and like 1780, in that general region, is when it would have been built. It just, that's right where George Stites, who was the founder of Lebanon, was originally called Stites That's where the town started. He started a town right in that general region. He had, I think it was like 300 acres or something that he bought. And then Johannes Light, where Light's Fort was, or is, he bought that, and that was 200 some acres that he bought. So there was starting to be a little bit of town there. And then you had sparingly places in between. And then where we've visited, Hebron Moravian Cemetery, that was its own town. That was actually the biggest of the three. And eventually they just all sort of melded, because Stites, which became like its own township, sort of absorbed everybody else as it grew rather quickly, after turning into Lebanon and became the county seat of Lebanon County, which is what Lebanon County is named after. And I think Lebanon County was formed 1813 out of Dauphin and Lancaster counties. It's just sort of how it worked back then. You had these counties that were much larger, and eventually they saw the need for, we need to develop a new county, and then take parts of each of those counties and new parts that would get added to it, and that would become a new county, and sort of went from there. But yeah, so this is a cool video series. I got to edit all this together now, but I think you guys are really going to enjoy getting to see one of these really cool old places. I'm going to have a little bit of an outro just where I say bye-byes, because this is the one where my phone, the old phone I was using, just sort of abruptly died. And so I'll say my bye-byes at the end of this video. You'll see my ugly face again, and go from there. But then, like I said, we'll have a second part, Light's Fort. Then there'll be a two-parter for Lindley Murray, because that second, the stories from that gentleman, which were so cool, and then Monroe Valley Chapel's in one part. So there'll actually be 5 videos coming up here in the next week or so. I'm going to try to have all 5 out. And then the Union Canal Days videos, I'm going to make several videos of just different events and things that are there. And you can enjoy that festival, and we'll maybe make even a walk down to the Union Canal Tunnel, take some lookies at that, and go from there. But thank you as always, and enjoy the rest of the video. Hey everybody, John Miller here, Hometown Historian. We're here on May 13th. We're here at Lights Fort. The Lebanon Valley Conservancy has 4 buildings in the area that they maintain. Lights Fort here, which is the oldest building in Lebanon County. It's built in 1742 by Johannes Light. This was a fort that was used during the French and Indian War, and it served many, many different purposes. Since we've actually visited here a couple of times. That 3rd floor section, there used to be a 3rd floor section that came right over to here. That got taken out at some point. There was some kind of storm damage, but the majority of the building is still here. So we're actually going to be able to go inside because they have an open house today at these 4 different buildings, and we'll get to see what an inside of an old French and Indian War fort looked like. And there's some other stuff we'll talk about. There's some tunnels that were used here that were built that went south. One went to almost a mile to 8th and Cumberland Street. And it was used to like these different village areas that if there was an attack coming in, they go in these tunnels and they come to the fort, and they'd be able to stay down in the basement where the spring is. And we'll actually hopefully be able to go down there. And the other one went to Willow and I believe 10th Street. And that one as well is another one of these. And that one would have went that way. And the 8th Street would have went down further, like more east. But a lot of really cool history here. Really, really neat place. It's gonna be fun. The other places they have open is the Log House on Chestnut Street, which Cliff and I, because Cliff's here, say hi, Wandering Woodsman. So he's here. Luis from Simplyexploventuring is supposed to be meeting us here as well. He's not here yet, but I'll get a picture with him and Cliff and stuff like that for the channel, and have him talk to you guys a little bit about his channel maybe. But they have the Log House on Chestnut Street, which is basically what the Germanic houses would have looked like in what at that time was called Steightstown. That one we're not going to try to go to today just because of parking issues, but also that's also open, I think, July and August. I think 2 Wednesdays a month for a good amount of hours. So Cliff and I will visit that sometime. And then the other ones are the Lindley Murray Schoolhouse in Indiantown Gap, which is an 1850s 1-room schoolhouse that we'll be able to visit and see the inside of what that would have looked like back at that time period. That one operated from 1850 to 1947 when the school district started to all come together. And then the last one is the Monroe Valley Chapel, which once again, that's another place we've visited quite a bit. I think Cliff can say, I can say it's one of my favorite places around. It's just a beautiful valley. And such a cool place, but we'll also be able to go inside there for the first time on the channel to see what that looks like. And here's Luis, and we'll talk to him then here in a little bit. So no, maybe that's not Luis, I'm sorry. So okay, thanks everybody, and we will see you further in the video. So we're going to be going on a tour here. A gentleman that I'll give you his name then. He actually does a lot of work with like Spanish-American War, and they're doing it's coming up on the 125th anniversary. So,
you're fine. You're gonna be fine.
If you want to introduce yourself again, sir.
My name is Jim McAteer. I'm a local historian, and I'm giving tours to the Lights Fort.
And you're also doing something with the Spanish-American War with the 125th.
I'm a member of the Alexander M. McQuinn camp of the Spanish-American War, which is the Lebanon camp, and I'm a past national president of the Sons of Spanish-American War. My wife is a past national president of the Daughters of Spanish-American War, and we have a daughters camp here too. Now, the building itself was built about 1742. Now, to give you an approximate age of this building, George Washington was 10 years old when this thing was completed. Shows you how old it was. Now the building has been used for a lot of things. It was originally built as a Mennonite meeting house. And then during the French and Indian War, which began about 1857 or 1757, around here there were a lot of Indians because this was the border. And basically what happened was the Indians were raiding, and the local citizens went to Philadelphia to try and get some help. And Philadelphia said, we're Quakers, we don't believe in violence. So So what they had to do was they had to start, many of them had to start their own private fort. Lightsport was a private fort. It was a very big place. The original property of that started somewhere into Coleman Park, went down to 22nd Street, went out to, and I'm not quite, I think 8th Street in the city, and I'm not quite sure how far south it went. So it was a big territory, a big plot, acreage. It could hold up to about 200 people. Now, we have no verified attack that happened during the French and Indian War. Local folklore has it that the Indians attacked and that the people inside went through the tunnels that were in here. And the Indians attacked the settlers who were in here, grabbed their muskets, went through the tunnels, came behind the Indians and repelled the attack. There's no verification that actually happened. Now, there are people who swear that there are tunnels under here. And there are people who swear at the people who say there are tunnels under here. Now, I don't know, when I was giving a tour, the previous owner of this property was in one of my tours, and he was telling me downstairs that there was a door, and if you went to the door, through the door you had the tunnel, but they cemented up the tunnel. The door, we'll show it to you when we get down. And there are other people who were telling me that there was a former sheriff of the county who, when he was a beat cop, there was a sinkhole that happened on the street up here, and when you look down the sinkhole, you could see the tunnel. Now, I can't verify it, so I'm not, but that's what people have said. Now, if you want, you can go down.
We already met him over there up at Gold Mine.
So here we have Cliff, Wandering Woodsman, and we have Luis from Simplyexploventuring. I'm going to put up their pages for the YouTube on the like the normal thing with descriptions and all that kind of stuff. So it's great to
you're just in time.
film with these guys.
People who have gone through the tour have told me that they used to live here. This part of the building is just separate from the other part. This building was made in about 3 different pieces. I'm not sure of the dates and whatnot. This was an apartment building. There was another apartment upstairs. And there used to be a fireplace bathroom in here. They had to take it down to take it out. The organization was going to redo it, but they ran out of money, which is one of the major things. Now, as far as history goes, somebody told me they read an article from about 1900 that said this was the biggest birdhouse in Lebanon County. You can hear that they haven't moved yet. And down here is where the tunnel, as you will have it, is. Now, if you'd like to get down, do hold on to the guardrails. These steps are built down in 1742. They don't like people.
Yeah.
So, grab the guardrails. There used to be 7 springs here. When I first started giving tours, this thing up to just about to your kneecap in water.
Wow.
So we had a landing over there. Now, again, they said that this is a tunnel. Now you can feel it's about 68 degrees in here right now. About 68 degrees in here all year long. If you're a business, which this was, it's a great place to hold your inventory. Not so great if it's a tunnel. So if it was a tunnel, they'd probably brick that up. And where you can see the indentation in wood, that side of the wall is where the previous owner, when he was on this tour, said there was a door there. And if you went through the door, you ended up in the tunnel. No, we obviously haven't tried to do it.
It's more like a cellar, though.
Yeah. And there are holes in here. Now, somebody once told me there are holes in this wall. You have to remember, see if I can see them. Yeah, there's one right there. Now, this place is pitch black. That's probably for a candle holder. So that's what somebody said on one of the tours. Now, and probably that is air conditioning for the upstairs. Now, the previous owner told me that the front, at one point, they used to store cars up there.
Oh, wow.
And what happened was, this whole ceiling collapsed.
Oh, wow.
And they had the concrete ceiling, tried to make it as best, so that's why it's a little bit more modern. You can see another great big hole here, probably again, I'm guessing for air conditioning.
You can see how this would work well for a distillery too, when they had that here.
Are there any questions?
No, this is amazing.
Now, what we hope to do, we hope to eventually, and this has been a hope that I've been giving up for the last 10 years, make this a historical building where people learn. Most people don't know what they're past their grandparents. But what we hope to do is people from 3 generations ahead of us find out what happened to people 3 generations behind us. Because they're not gonna know it otherwise unless we preserve it.
So now something like we have the option here, like Cliff especially, he has what, 62,000 subscribers? Lewis and I are a little smaller. We're catching up, but we're getting there. But like, I have an offer, like I'll say to my subscribers, hey, if you guys are interested in donating to preserving this, to be able to make it a possibility to do this. That's one of the purposes, like for my channel, for instance, is I want to work with local historical societies, make people aware of what is right outside our door, the amazing history. Because most people, Revolutionary War even is now becoming where people don't know much about it. French and Indian War is definitely that way. Because Cliff does an awesome series on the French and Indian War, which follows the forts, it follows the different battles, the different things that happen in that. People just aren't aware of that. So if we can get people to donate, who would they donate to help this organization?
My name is Jan Morrissey, and I'm president of the Historic Preservation Trust that owns the property here. We have a website. We also, any donations could go to our post office box number, which is Post Office Box 844, Lebanon, Pennsylvania, 17042. We have a Facebook page as well as the website page. We're not set up for donations to be available through the website, but hope to do that in the near future so that things can be done that way as well. There's a lot of lights that are locally here, and many lights have spread out across the United States of America. So I just had an email recently from someone who was like, wow, I'm related to Johannes Light of Lights Fort. And there's many people like that even though they may not be locally to help us and are willing to donate. So the Post Office Box 844, Lebanon, Pennsylvania, 17042 is how they could help us out.
That's great. I've done a couple videos on lights. I did over at Covenant Greenwood where they moved the 2 cemeteries. And then there's another one near Fredericksburg. And I talked about, and all these people are like, I'm related to those people.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's so cool. My history goes back. Thank you for doing this. Because they don't know a lot. But this still exists.
Yeah, and he had 4 sons and other daughters anyhow, and each one of them also had multiple sons. So there's lots of lights that are around, like I said, still locally and across the United States anyhow then. So that's where awareness through our Facebook page of the Lights Fort page, as well as the Historic Preservation Trust of Lebanon County, which is how you fellows found out about us today anyhow then. So we really appreciate you coming out and doing this for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll post on the video like your links and all those kinds of things,
Sure.
and re-put up the PO boxes so people can see that.
See
And
that anyhow,
hopefully some
yeah.
people can donate.
Sure. And then also today we have opened the Chestnut Street Log House, which is at 1110 Chestnut Street in Lebanon. That is an old log property that has been restored and over the years. We also have Monroe Valley Chapel, which is all on Jonestown Monroe Valley Road. That is open today as well too. So that property was in rubbles, and 2 teachers, Joe Verhalowitz and Tom Dunmoyer from Northern Lebanon High School. They got together a group of students, and through their knowledge and so forth, and donations of stone and so forth, they've been, I mean, the picture of that then versus now is just awesome anyhow then. So, and that property is open for weddings. If anyone just needs to do a small wedding of some sort, there's no electric there, but that's open for private, weddings and so forth too anyhow then. So, and some of the kids back in the 70s who worked on that have come back there and gotten married. So I think that's really cool anyhow then, so. And then also Lyndon Murray Schoolhouse, which is out at Azure Minor Road, just off of 934 going towards Indiantown Gap. You walk in there and it's a walk back in time with the old school desks and the blackboard, chalkboards and everything anyhow then. So that's just all, we need to preserve history.
Absolutely. Thank you so much what both of you are doing.
Thank you.
Because this is so often people don't recognize the work you guys put into it, and it deserves to be recognized.
Thank you.
I joke about sometimes like you're doing God's work. You are, because it's like there's so much of that from Lebanon County Historical Society, Friends of Old Annville. They do the meticulous work that nobody thinks about,
Yeah.
to digitizing, to preserving these places, whatever it is. They preserve our history, our ancestors'
Yeah.
legacy, and that's so important.
Thank you. Sure.
So is this the spring that they mentioned, like, where there's like a flowing spring in here all the time?
There were 7 springs coming in. I think that's one, I don't know how many are going in there.
Okay.
And, because a
It's
few years
good.
ago, this flooded again.
Okay.
I mentioned it had flooded when I first started here several years ago.
But this is where this is where the spring water came in, I guess?
Yeah, and it would make sense that if you're gonna build a property in 1742, you don't have running water. So you build over a spring, and that way in February, you don't have to run out and chop ice.
Well, that and at a time like this being a private fort, much like Zeller's Fort over in Newmanstown, they built over a spring specifically if they were
To have fresh
surrounded,
water available.
they had that at all times. 'Cause that's the thing you need more than anything,
Yes, fresh water.
is fresh water.
Yeah.
And you had it, so you could hold out in one of these stone buildings.
And it also gives credence to the tunnels, because freshwater, limestone,
Hmm.
so there very well could have been a tunnel here.
Yeah,
This implies that there probably was,
yeah.
but we can't prove it.
Yeah, my friend Bob Sheets had said, when they built the Quittapahilla, when they did that whole thing to flood
Okay.
with the cement, they said where they went through the one time, they apparently went right through one of those tunnels.
Okay.
And that's how they're like, okay, apparently it's true.
Or, yeah.
So, because apparently that went right through one of the tunnels. I think that is one of them come right through over here, somewhere where the cement.
Street, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so I think apparently when they did that, it was in the 70s or 60s, whenever they did, they went right through one of those tunnels.
And there are
So they do exist.
Yeah.
There are people who are on the tour who have said, I know there's a tunnel because there's one under my house.
Yeah,
And they're in the city, but there are steam lines going through the city.
Yeah.
This tunnel might, if there was a tunnel, might not be connected to that tunnel.
Yeah.
It wasn't- And there was a person who told me one time that he was a prison guard,
Mhm.
or the prison when it was on 8th Street. And he used to take people from here to the prison on 8th Street through the tunnel.
wow.
But I got to thinking about that later. If you were guarding a whole bunch of prisoners, would you guard them in a dark tunnel, or would you guard them high up on
Yeah.
the street in broad daylight?
Yeah, things aren't going to wind out good for you if that happens.
He had no reason to lie, but I
Yeah.
can't verify his story.
They're saying too, like where Stevens Tower is where, well, it used to be the Stevens School. They said one of the tunnels led right to that, supposedly. Now, once again, whether that's true, you have folklore and you say you sort of take it with a grain of salt unless you can actually verify it, like you had said earlier. So, but most likely it was there, and it makes sense because those were where they would have been areas where there would have been smaller settlements. So people would have a way to get to where they needed to be secure, because this was the frontier. People don't understand, like this was the frontier.
Just wooded land all around us, woods.
Yeah,
The Albany Treaty was in 42, and by the basically the border. By the Albany Treaty, we were going to buy from the Indians all the land that you could reasonably pass through in 24 hours. The Indians expected us to walk. The colonies got their fastest runner and they just took off.
Yeah.
Indians were not too happy about that.
No.
And when the war broke out, revenge.
Yeah.
So this area really got hit hard.
Well, and the funny thing about that, well, I shouldn't say funny, but the interesting thing about that, well, the Napes was the land that was sold, and it was sold by the Iroquois Nation. Because Conrad Weiser thought that Iroquois Nation was be more of a fear, because it was, I think, like 6 or 7 nations. So, and the Lenape, to that point, Delaware Indians had been reasonably civil. And then when that happened, that was the final straw for them. And that's, like, Swatara Gap was known as the Hole. I was looking at a map from the 1700s. They feared it that much, they just called it the Hole, because you didn't want anything coming out of it wasn't good. And so it's really interesting, like, how everything evolved here, and all the little forts that they're more like this would be called a place of refuge. And like Fort Swatara was a fort of the actual Commonwealth or the colony at that time. Manada, all those ones. But these were probably more secure because they were stone, because a lot of them were wood. Well, people can light that on fire. So probably not a best idea, but this place is just extraordinary that it still exists. And
Yeah, and it's gone through a large number of different histories. The industries that were here, I'm not quite sure which ones were here. They're important. Somebody had once told me this was an underground railroad station. Can't prove it. So there's a lot of different history, and what do you concentrate on? You concentrate on the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, 2000s.
yeah.
So it is going to be interesting to see how the structure ends up being historically marked.
Is it drinkable?
I'm sorry?
Is it drinkable?
You can be the first one to try it.
If he doesn't make it through the day, we know.
I think I will.
I was doing that one time it was.
Yeah, I mean, I just know if you knew if there was something wrong with it or not.
Yeah,
Okay.
not that I'm aware of
All right.
anyhow. When the water was in here, it was crystal
Right.
clear.
Right.
It was crystal clear. Even when we had different rainstorms, it was
Yeah.
always crystal clear, before we had the stone and everything down.
Well, it's not every day you drink from a well from a spring from 74.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cliff is willing to take a chance. This is also the guy that somebody paid him $5 to eat a salamander raw, and he did it. Was it, or was it a newt?
It doesn't really matter.
And worms. I've known him for a long time. It's scary what he'll eat.
Shall I get warm? Remember going up, it's as easy to fall going up as it is coming down.
Oh, yeah.
So do be extremely careful.
Once again, thank you.
You're welcome. Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Do you have a business card at all, or?
I don't, but I can send it in or something,
Okay,
because I
that'd be
would like to
great.
actually work with you guys as much
That
as
would be
possible
great.
to be able
Right,
to.
just like to keep the contact anyhow then, so, and if you can sign
Yeah.
up, sheet in upstairs anyhow then, so.
Because my subscribers and other things, we've talked to them about different places trying to preserve it, and they give.
Get it.
Because they really get
Get
it.
it, yeah.
Because, hi Cliff.
So I'm gonna drink from the spring.
All right, so you guys get to see me here at the end of the video as well. I will explain. I don't know what happened when it just went bye-byes, but Cliff did drink from the spring. As far as I know, there were no ill effects beyond what's already wrong with him. He said it actually tasted normal and stuff like that. Because actually, I saw a thing on Lebtown where they talked about they tested the water and it tested fine. But there's actually 7 springs that go in underneath there, so it was actually a pretty perfect place if you're going to put a place like that. If you think about it, at a time, if you're, say, have somebody surrounded you and you can't get out, at the very least you have access to fresh water, and they can't get that from you. So you could last almost indefinitely as long as you have some kind of food. You don't have too many people that you have too many needs and stuff like that. But it was just a lot of times with those stone structures too, they were impossible to do anything to, which is why they worked really well as forts. But anyways, it was a lot of fun. There will be a part 2 where we're going to go into that Lebanon article and go into the history of Lights Fort with some pictures and things like that, and into a little bit of video footage that I do have, and I just got to regather that and get that into the appropriate places, and then I can wind out making that film up as well for you guys. Jan Morrissey takes that over a little bit and then tells us a lot about the area there and what the future plans are and things of that nature. But as always, I want to say thank you for coming along. This is a lot of fun, this video, a lot of fun that day. Filming with Cliff and Lewis, so I want to say thank you to those guys because this was a blast. And as always, we will see you all about town.